and the scribes, to be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, behind me, Satan, you are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. Then Jesus looked at his disciples and said to them, whoever wishes to come after me must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. For what profit would there be for one to gain the entire world and forfeit their life? Or what can one give in exchange for their life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to their conduct. The Gospel of the Lord. Well, good morning again. I'm Steve Salat, and I used to be the pastor of St. Edward's in Dana Point. And Father Tim's getting away for a couple weeks, and so we asked if some of us could fill in a little bit. And so I'm honored and blessed to be here this morning with a great community. It's great to be back in South Carolina a little bit, but it's great to see you again. I've been here before, and so it's wonderful to kind of reconnect. For a moment, how might we connect with these scriptures? Because they're kind of harsh scriptures. Let me begin this way. Most of us have been seeing in some visual or written way this past week a lot of talk about the hurricane in Houston and all the resulting effects, the flooding, people's panic, the fear, people being rescued, people rescuing those who need rescuing, people breaking through their roof in order to get on top, so a helicopter, somebody coming by will see them and know that they're there. Lots of drama, lots of tragedy. In the midst of it, though, there have been some interesting moments and conversations that people have had. And one of them, I noticed, was the lady was from Louisiana. Matter of fact, from New Orleans. And she was there in 2005 when Katrina hit. And she said, I never want to go through that again. So she felt moved and invited by a family that lived near Houston to come and live with them. Start your life over again. So she said, wow, this is wonderful. I'm kind of blessed that I have a chance. And I'm going to go someplace where this is not going to happen again. And as she was being exited from one of the little rescue flatboats, she kind of had that conversation with the reporter. And she had that anger and that disappointment and that irritation that, my God, this is happening to me all over again. I can't believe this. Well, that's just a little bit of what we heard in that first reading from the prophet Jeremiah. And that's the setting. He'd been called to be one of the great prophets of Israel, so he thought, wow, I'm in the groove with God. And everything's going to go my way. The people are going to listen to everything I have to say and how they're going to transform and change their lives. And this passage is when Jeremiah is in hiding. Because all the people he thought would receive what he had to say, because it's from God, actually want to kill him. So he's hiding. And so in his mind, he's been duped. Oh Lord, I have been duped. You duped me. How could you do this to me? And so there's that angst that he feels about how his plans and his perspective on everything was all flipped upside down. The hero he thought he would be, now he's a villain by the people. And then we walk into a gospel account where Peter, if you remember any of the scriptures from last Sunday, was all about, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, Now, if somebody had pointed me out in the group and had said that to me, I would have gone, wow, I have it made. Everything is going to go my way. Even the Lord has noticed, I'm number one, I'm the best in the group. And that's a pretty natural, normal feeling. And everything is like looking up. It's clear to me why I cast my nets aside to follow this guy who showed up as a stranger and now has become a very intimate friend. And then Jesus turns to him and said, get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me in the way that you are perceiving who you are in your role. But you think about it for a moment, it's not all that surprising. But there's this kind of conflict. There's this sense of two sides to every coin. In St. Peter's, I got a chance to go there, I think when I was in college, which is just a few years ago. And I spoke no Latin, I still don't, but somebody pointed out to me in taking the tour in St. Peter's, the big cupola, the big center of the church, there are the words described in Latin, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. And I was really impressed with that. But now that I remember that image in my mind, it's interesting that they didn't put it behind me, Satan. They didn't put the other side to that story there. I think it's kind of human nature to kind of remember the good side and not so much maybe the darker side. But when we think about who we are and how we kind of engage in this world and how we fit into this world, it's not surprising that this tension exists. Think about any relationship you've ever had. Think whether it's a parent-child relationship, a love relationship, a work relationship, whatever it is, even a relationship with God, it all starts out where? It starts out with self-interest. I remember in 3rd grade at St. Cecilia's in Tustin, I had fallen in love with Betsy Alter. She had more freckles than you could count. She had bright red hair, but she was the most popular kid in both 3rd grades. And so, when I became her boyfriend, I was the hero. I was known to everybody. Suddenly, I had name recognition that I hadn't had before. Because it wasn't really about Betsy. It was really about what that was doing for me. Of course, she dumped me after 2 days. So I got over that fairly quickly. But that sense that it's kind of innate in us when we begin any relationship, that it's really about what that relationship will do for me. So it's no surprise about Jeremiah. It's no surprise about Peter. It's no surprise really for us, even with God, where we start. And I think that's what Jesus is pointing to when he says, unless you lose your life, unless you lose that way of thinking and perceiving yourself in this world, you're really going to lose your life. You will never gain my deeper truth for you. Easy thing to say, hard to do. But think about our relationship with God. Why we come to church? Is it eternal fire insurance? That's going to save me from the fires of hell. This is making God happy. As if somehow the master of the universe is excited because you and I are here. Okay? What I can do for God today? Or is it really what God can do for me? And how I might be opened up to realizing that really this world and my life, it's not all about me. It's how I can be transformed to be like Christ. Who what, as he says, has to suffer and even to die for the sake of the truth. And then somehow those things, those floods, those realities that invade all of our lives, our families, our neighborhoods, whether it's jobs, whether it's the loss of a relationship, whether it's difficulties and struggles in families, whether it's addictions, whatever it is, all of those things ultimately are not pointing it back to us. It's really pointing it somewhere else. But that is part of the life that we are called to embrace. As imperfect as it is, as imperfect as you and I are. And that does not mean that God has abandoned us, but rather is inviting us into a different way of being and perceiving ourselves. That this world and even our own life is not ultimately all about us. Now, I must say, when that lady was helped out of the boat, the picture that I saw was she tripped and she got wet. And yet she got up, she shook it off, she embraced the man that got her out of the boat and said, "We will go on. And we will live." And I believe that's really ultimately for us, is how we are to live. In the midst of everything, even when we feel like we're drowning, we take a deep breath and say, "I will live." And we will live together as church. We will live together with God's grace. In order to save our life, we must lose that which we lose, that the world and everything around it is about us. And when we begin to be transformed, as St. Paul says, of that in our mind, we really begin to discover who we are and how God has called us